Just for transparency's sake, I'm going to show you that I have 3 negative feedbacks right now on my account. Hello everybody, welcome to Commonwealth Flipper. My name is Kevin. We're in the Commonwealth cabin, and today's video is going to be quite a bit different than the typical what's sold in here. So I'm going to try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I get more questions about negative feedback and shipping than any 2 questions around, and I don't consider myself necessarily an expert in either, but I have been doing this quite a while, and I thought I would try to answer some questions about negative feedback on eBay in a way that's helpful, especially to new folks and people that haven't been doing it for a while. And I'd ask some of you folks who have been doing it for quite a while to kind of chime in and feel free to disagree with me. Give your opinions in the comments and maybe even answer some other folks' questions below. And I can learn from you. Maybe some of you can learn a little bit from me, but definitely we can all get better at this and kind of have a different perspective on negative feedback than maybe we've had in the past. All right, so I'm going to attempt to do 4 different things today in this video and hopefully answer a few questions along the way. The first thing is, how do you initially react to it? You know, when somebody says something about you, just as a human being, you know, you have this visceral reaction sometimes, this anger, and that's understandable. I think that's true of almost all of us. You know, I've been a teacher and a high school baseball coach and a YouTuber for that matter for quite a while, so I'm used to getting yelled at a little bit. Plus, I'm married. So, I'm kidding. Blue Ridge Mom would never yell at me. So the initial reaction, and do you go straight to that keyboard and start typing, or do you just relax for a minute and breathe a little bit? I think that's the first thing. So I'm going to talk about your initial reaction and then your real response to it. You know, you're formulating a plan of action for that particular feedback, or maybe even for the future. The next thing is, what kind of actual action are you going to do? What's going to take place? What are your actual physical steps that you're going to do, either to get rid of it or to mitigate it a little bit or to make sure it doesn't happen in the future? That's the last thing I want to talk about, which is prevention. And I want to get your opinion about how to get more feedback. I'll give you my opinion. And I also want to talk a little bit about, is it that important? Is having a little negative feedback going to really affect you that bad? Or do you not need to worry about it until maybe you get a bunch of it? So I wanted to thank you for joining us, and hopefully you get a little bit of benefit out of this, and certainly I hope I can too. All right, I've already talked a little bit about the initial reaction, because you can't let that anger get to you and just start popping off. So even though it might be legitimate, and in most cases for buyers it is legitimate, right? The mistake is almost always not yours. And if it is yours, I'm going to talk about that too, how you deal with it. Or better yet, how I would deal with it. You may deal with it in a different way. Once you get past that kind of initial cooling off period, just look at it from their perspective. Try to anyways. As illogical as it might sound to you, look at it from their perspective, and you paid for something, you got it. Now, it's different if you think there's a scammer involved or something, and they didn't do what you wanted to, and they are just looking for a refund, and you know it's a scammer. That's a little different here. But if they're complaining about something, like, let me give you an example. I'll tell you a couple personal stories. And let me say this. I have almost constantly in 20 years carried a negative feedback. Now, I don't think I've ever been below like 99.7 or something like that, because I do a lot of volume. I mean, around 4,000 or so plus items a year. And, you know, you can afford a little negative feedback. Now, if you're a new seller, maybe it's not quite as easy to afford that kind of a negative feedback. And that's an issue for sure. But that ought to be something we'll talk about when we talk about prevention. And we'll talk about that just briefly at the end of the video. But back to my initial story here. So here's an example of me making an actual mistake and getting negative feedback. So I shipped out a scrub top. Very colorful. Tons of different colors all over the place. Wild. And they said, hey, there's paint on this thing. It was cheap. I mean, it was like $8 plus shipping, right? And they complained like, hey, there's paint on this thing. I'm like, you know, I didn't say, what are you talking about? There's no paint on this thing. My initial response was, you know, hey, I'm sorry you're dissatisfied with the item. I'm sorry if I've made a mistake here. I would like to make up for it. Could you please do me a favor, send me a picture of that thing? Now, this is after they left the negative feedback. They didn't send me the message. I knew that because I read their negative feedback. There's paint all over this thing, bad seller, whatever. And so I sent them that message, didn't mention anything about the negative feedback. Just totally dealt with it like, hey, if I screwed up, I'm going to make this right. Let me know. Not if you do this, I'll, take off my negative feedback, I'll give you whatever. I didn't give them any ultimatums. I wanted to first find out if I made the mistake. And they sent me a picture. It wasn't very big, but it was on there. It was hidden because of all the other colors, but there was paint on there. Somebody used that thing to paint. And so I'm like, hey, perfect. I'm going to go and I'm going to give you a full refund. Please don't bother sending it back. My apologies. I'm sorry. I went and did that and waited a little while to make sure they saw my message. They saw the feedback, or excuse me, they saw the refund. And then the very next day, I hit them up. Actually, I think they'd sent me a message saying thank you. And I responded back saying, hey, I would really, really appreciate it. I do this for a living. I don't really, I teach, but you get the point. I do this and I try my best, and I always want my customers to be satisfied, yada, yada, yada. And I would appreciate it if you would consider doing this. And then I sent them the feedback revision. Actually, I didn't even send them the feedback revision yet, because you only get so many of those. I waited to get a response first. And they said, yeah, I'd be happy to. Then I sent them the feedback revision. And they did it just like that. So that's one way to deal with it, especially if it's your fault, right? Now, I've had other instances where I have had things, I'm going to show you in just a second, where they were not willing to take it off or wouldn't respond at all. And I'm going to show you those because they're still on there. And then I've had some that I've had to have eBay step in and fix. And eBay won't always do that. Matter of fact, I've found it more difficult in the last year or so, certainly since COVID, for them to be able to do it. I used to be able to get on the phone. I don't know if this is your experience, when I could get on the phone with them, and I could go around in circles with the best of them and get it taken care of. Now there's the automated online version that I don't think anybody really looks at, and you almost always get this rejection. And then I go to eBay for Business, and there's where I sometimes get some satisfaction. All right, I thought I'd give you another little anecdotal story here. This is something else that's happened to me, and then I'm going to show you the actual negative feedback that I have that stands. And I've had one a few years back that was done from somebody overseas in different language, and there's always some complications that sometimes you can't unwind, and sometimes eBay's unwilling to unwind. But this one was interesting, and I thought, oh my goodness, eBay is definitely going to change this one for me, and they didn't. But I went to eBay for Business, and they took care of it on Facebook, and they took care of it for me. So the issue was I usually sell, and people think I'm nuts for doing this, but backgammon replacement pieces. And so I sold some, and this person was ticked off when they got it. They're like, this is misleading. They only sent me 2 pieces, one black and one white, or one cream and one brown, or whatever it was. I can't even remember. And they said, matter of fact, I have it right on here. So it says fraud, exclamation point, on and on and on. Misleading, only 2 pieces, one black, one white. And of course, I'm like, I've sold, 30, 40 of these over the years, and I've never had a complaint. So I'm like, wait a minute. So I go and I look at the listing, and the listing actually says in the description, it says in there, replacement pieces. It's got a picture of 2. The description says only 2. This is not a full set, right? And of course, I'm like, this is crazy. This person left negative feedback. First-time buyer, had never bought anything before. And so I'm like, I'm not going to come after this person. I'm just going to respond, right? They never contacted me. I'm going to respond to them and say, hey, I'm sorry, you're right. This is misleading. People, I could see how you assumed it was blah, 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 blah. Even though I feel like saying, just read the description and you would have got it, right? Because it explicitly says, this is not for a set. I didn't do that because that wasn't going to get me anywhere. And so this person's like, hey, no problem. I refunded the money already. I didn't ask anything about feedback yet. Everything was done, got a response from them. And then I said, hey, and I didn't expect a response to this, by the way. I said, hey, I would really appreciate it if you would consider revising this feedback. And they're like, okay, no problem. How do I do it? And I'm like, I'm going to send you this thing and then, whatever. So I requested the feedback, and that you do that, by the way, on the feedback page. So I said, you're going to get a message, and they did. They got a message, and they're like, I tried to do it, and it wouldn't let me do it. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe they just didn't know the steps to do it. I've never seen it from that side, so I couldn't really tell them to be able to do it. And I was like, could you try one more thing? Well, at that point, they don't care. They're not an eBayer. They don't care about me. They don't care about their pieces. It's a done deal for them. But they did respond back one more time and said, hey, I don't know how to do this, but if eBay reads this message, just take the feedback off. I'm like, great. And so I put that in their automated system online to see if I could get it removed, thinking, yeah, they probably will. They denied it. Here's what they said. Actually, let me read you what the buyer said. I attempted to revise feedback to positive. When I clicked the link, I received a note of your feedback is eligible for revision. I give eBay permission to revise my feedback from negative to positive for the backgammon replacement part. eBay may contact me if necessary. They will have my contact information on file. I'll be checking my eBay messages. Basically, they don't know how to do it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I did this. I tried to go online and go through their process. Wouldn't do it. And I got the message back from eBay, and this is what it said. And I'm sure you've seen this if you've tried it. It says, we've looked carefully at this feedback and see that it does not qualify for removal. Feedback is a way to let your members know, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, this is automated. Nobody's read this thing, because anybody with half a brain would realize that this needed, the buyer who's inexperienced would love to take this off. I would love to have it off. I've refunded it. They're going to take it off. They didn't do it. So I went directly to eBay for Business on Facebook and put the request in, put the item number in, and it was taken care of within 24 hours. Here's their response. After reviewing the messages between you and your buyer, we were able to remove the negative feedback from your account. It will be gone within the hour. Thanks again for working with your customer. Let us know if you have any other questions or concerns. So there you go. They took it off, eBay for Business. So that's a tool that if you haven't used it, you should use it. But I want to talk about one other tool that I'm not experienced with, and then we'll talk about maybe some possible actions in the future or some preventative measures. And this is where I need your help a little bit from some of you experienced folks out there. Have you ever paid somebody? There are people out there whose business it is to fix feedback, right? There's so many companies out there. There's so many people who are much bigger than mom and pop stuff like me, who sell more than, 4,500 items a year, and they just simply don't have the time to deal with feedback. It's not all that important, but they could pile up. Depending on what you sell, certain items are going to get negative feedback more often than others. If you're selling vintage electronics, you're going to get negative feedback. It's bound to happen. And so depending on what you're selling, it's going to happen more often than not. So some companies are paying somebody to do it. They give people, some small folks like us, and maybe you've seen the advertisements out there, and I'm not condemning it or saying do it or don't do it because I don't know enough. I want to get your feedback from it. Are these people reputable? You have to give them access, backdoor access into your account to be able to do this, and that's a risky kind of thing. But I want to hear from you. Has anybody out there tried that third-party person to help you remove it, or do you think it's just not necessary? You can take the steps. Next question is it that important? But before we do that, just for transparency's sake, I'm going to show you that I have 3 negative feedbacks right now on my account, and it doesn't really even bother me. All right, I hope you can see this. I think I've blocked out everything you don't need to see. So VCR didn't work, kept turning off. So I put a response to this one because there was no way this is going to be removed. The buyer would not respond. I sent a request to him and saying, hey, I will be more than happy to take this item back. It says it right here. I fully tested the VCR, which is true. I do. I fully test every single VCR that I have before I ship them out. That's not to say what he's saying is not true. Okay? I don't test every single AV cable. I've got piles and piles and piles of them. And so that just not, but you know what? I mean, how often is an AV cable not going to work? Okay. Is it possible that this thing rattled a little bit in shipping and ended up not working? It's possible. There's all kinds of things that are possible. I don't think this guy's a fraudster because I was offering full, everything, whatever. Maybe he is. I don't know. I doubt it. Normally, if you deal with it the way I did, it wasn't going to end the way it did. I fully tested this item, offered a full return, including shipping, and they did not give me a reply. So that's how I dealt with that one, and it is what it is. That was probably their experience, that the thing didn't work. If you just give them the refund and allow them to keep the item, it just encourages more people to be fraudsters. This person may or may not have been, but I don't know that for certain. But all I did was ask for a return. I didn't even pay for the return just because I just don't give full refunds to people and allow them to keep the item unless there is sufficient evidence for me that this is on the up and up. And it may very well have been, but I don't know that for sure. Second one, I bought a shirt and received a different shirt. Bad seller. I was like, okay, this was a great one right here. This is somebody who is leaving the country the next day, supposedly. I asked them for a picture of the shirt that they received, and they send me a picture of it, and it is the exact shirt that's in the picture they ordered. Exactly the same shirt. I'm like, well, and I said that, I'm like, this is the shirt that you ordered. I was like, here's the picture of the other shirt. Look at the listing. No response, negative feedback. And, you know, what are you going to do at that point? So I just took it. I mean, that's what it is. Now, I sent this one off to eBay as well. And of course, they denied it. And this is before, you know, this is after COVID. There's no phone calls. And then I send this thing off to eBay for Business on Facebook. And they did not change it. And they took forever to get back to me, which is really, really not exactly the way. This happened right in the midst of the beginning chaos. So, you know, at that point, I had only had one other negative feedback, and I'm like, it's not going to kill me, no big deal. This one down here, game was brand new. Oh, this is, it says game doesn't work. This was an NCAA football PlayStation 2 game, 08. Well, this was a brand new game. This thing was in the plastic, never been opened. They sent me a message. This one I thought maybe was a fraudster and said, hey, this thing doesn't work. And I said, hey, you know, feel free. I'll be happy to return it, you know. And that was a stretch, y'all, because that thing was brand new in the plastic, and they were going to return it out of the plastic. And that was the last I heard from them. And didn't hear from them again, no response. And I thought that eBay would revise this one, change this one, and they did not on eBay or on the eBay for Business. Very disappointed. Not quite as disappointed in this one, because there were no pictures that showed the size any different and whatever on this one. It was the same shirt. The guy couldn't have an identical shirt. It was not a common shirt. But I can kind of get why they didn't do it on this one. This one was completely ridiculous to me. But their argument essentially is, you know, how do we know you sent the game brand new? We don't know that you sent the game brand new. And I'm like, well, this is ridiculous. The picture's here. You know, you have my record, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to leave a response to it. And here's the kicker, guys. I never, ever noticed, not even for a second, a slowdown in sales. And I have never noticed a slowdown in sales when I have carried 1, 2, 3, or even 4 negative feedbacks. Now, if you've only sold four things and you have 3 negative feedbacks, that's a different story. But I'm not going to spend 7 hours of my life doing that when I could use those 7 hours and list 50 new things. If you sell thousands of things a year, you can carry some negative feedback and it's not going to affect you. Does it hurt the algorithm? We don't know. My suspicion is it does, but probably not until a certain level. You know, if I look at a buyer that has thousands of sales, 1,000 sales in a month or something ridiculous like that, and they have a negative feedback, not a big deal. If they have negative feedback on the same item 4 or 5 times, then we'll have a problem. So, you know, that's just my opinion, but I'm willing to listen to y'all out there. I want to learn a little bit more. Those are some of my experiences, and I want to talk about prevention really quick as well. Hey, just really quick about prevention, there's a couple things you could do. One is to increase the positive feedback so it kind of mitigates the negative feedback. And you can do that. There's automated systems. You can manually send emails to people and say, hey, you know, would you mind leaving me feedback? You could leave a little note in each package, a little extra, a freebie, a sticker. You know, I have a business card. I have a sticker I throw in there. You know, there's different things like that you can do to hopefully increase those positive feedbacks. So when you get a negative, it's not such a big deal. The other thing is be careful as to what you are selling. So if you're new and you already have a negative feedback and you only maybe have 50 sales, maybe if you have any questionable item, if you have electronics, something that may go wrong, maybe you hold back on those items until a little bit later and maybe do those when you have a little bit more positive feedback there. So I want to get your opinion. I want to glean some knowledge from y'all, especially from you old pros out there, and give me some tips where I'm wrong, maybe where I'm right, maybe where you agree with me, maybe answer some questions for some newbies out there, and let me know what I'm missing. All right, so thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. And I can't wait. I'm on a break right now, probably when you're hearing this. I need a little break, to be honest with you, a little breather. And I'm going to come back ready to roar and get back to reselling. And we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.